Hello and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, China and the Chinese around the world celebrate the Dragon Boat Festival with Dragon Boat races taking place all over the world. Is the holiday staying true to its original spirit? I speak with the Secretary General of China Development Research Foundation on China communicating with the rest of the world and how childhood education can alleviate poverty. And we begin today's show with this year's Dragon Boat Festival. The event is celebrated on the 5th day of the traditional Chinese calendar's 5th month. People across China mark the occasion by eating the traditional snack known as zongs and drinking a type of Chinese wine. But most noticeably, Dragon Boat races are held across the country and even abroad, adding to the festival atmosphere. Well, there's also more serious historical side to this popular holiday. Before we go to our panel to discover those important aspects of it, let's take a look at this background story first.
A bite of tradition. Zongzi, or glutinous rice dumplings, are the traditional staple for the Chinese Dragon Boat Festival. Stuffed with either sweet or savory fillings and wrapped in bamboo leaves, they are then steamed or boiled. The festival is celebrated annually to commemorate the death of Chinese poet Qu Yuan, a patriotic writer and a politician. Continually slandered by rival politicians, he was exiled by the king. Without Qu's guidance, his state was soon invaded by a neighboring kingdom. Upon hearing the news, Qu Yuan threw himself into the Miluo River on the 5th day of the 5th month in the Chinese lunar calendar. To protect his body from being eaten by fish, the people threw zongzi into the river and held dragon boat races. And all these became rituals that have lasted over 1,000 years. The beat of the drum signals the start of the race, and the whole city seems immersed in the carnival atmosphere. It isn't just a competition, it's also about keeping the tradition alive. Making perfumed medicine bags, drawing tigers and hanging mugwort and calamus. These are also some traditions that ancient people used to commemorate the day, as the Duanwu festival has always played an important role every year throughout Chinese history. The Dragon Boat Festival has long been a time for Chinese to practice these ancient traditions, and it is becoming a cultural icon for people to honor the poet, the poem, and the history.
To celebrate the Dragon Boat Festival, I have two guests in the studio with me. I have to always drag the both of you to my studio every time we have a celebration. David Moser, Academic Director at Capital Normal University. He is a Beijinger already, being here for 20 years.
I'm an old dragon, yeah.
Well, at least
older than
a lot
me.
of zongzi already over the
Right,
years.
right.
And also Ms. Han Hua, great to see you again.
My
Media and
pleasure.
Communication Consultant, good to have you. What about that? What is the most important thing for this festival? Is it food or food for thoughts? David. I see some hesitation there.
Well, you say I'm an old Beijinger. I mean, food, of course. Without food, there is no thought, right?
Yeah.
But yes, you are right. I do think you have a point that the Dragon Boat Festival is one of the more thoughtful or intellectual festivals.
Why is
of
that,
China.
from your perspective?
Well, partly because it's to memorialize or commemorate a famous poet who was
Qu Yuan.
Qu Yuan,
yeah.
who was an influential public intellectual, I guess you could say, and also because he was a man of principle. So yeah, you're supposed to eat, but also think of these lofty principles.
Is that what you're doing, Ms. Han?
There are about there are 24 solar terms in Chinese lunar year calendar, but there are only 4 most important festivals that we're going to memorize. One is Spring Festival, the other is June Sweeping Festival. The third one is this, Duan Wu or Dragon Boat Festival. So this is one of the most important festivals that our Chinese to celebrate every year, every Chinese lunar year. And this is the only one festival that we are memorizing a Chinese intellectual, a Chinese poet for his contributions.
During the Warring States period of time, there are so many different kinds of kingdoms, as we know.
Yes.
And there are different arguments as who exactly paved the way for future civilization of the Chinese kingdom. But of course, Yuan is one of those that have emerged on the historic scene. So why is he that important? David,
well,
test of your Chinese history.
Well, I hope my students are not watching. I'm going to make a fool of myself. But no, but
I'll make sure they're all going to watch.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, the Warring States period, this was a period where at least 7 different states were warring against each other. And I think the reason that people look to Yuan, especially I've seen in times when there's a sort of a feeling of national unity in China, that they hearken back to him because he was someone who was sort of unjustly criticized or falsely accused by the powers that be. He was also someone who was fiercely patriotic and loyal, and he saw all around him a sort of his beloved state descending into chaos and being invaded by the Qin and all these other countries.
Wow.
So he is not only as someone who is a great poet, but his poetry resonates with justified righteous anger.
To provide you with
Yes.
more food for thought, read from this paragraph the specific
From Li Sao.
Okay.
excerpts coming from that point.
All right. With cress leaves green my simple gown I made, with lilies white my rustic garb did braid. Why should I grieve to go unrecognized, since in my heart fragrance was truly prized? Should I go on?
Yes.
Yes.
Until you finish.
My headdress then high pinnacled I raised, lengthened my pendants where bright jewels blazed. Others may smirch their fragrance and bright hues. My innocence is proof against abuse. So there you go.
Very strong
How
spirit over
beautiful.
there, even in this very small excerpt of
Yeah.
these
Yes.
poems. But what is it about it that a poet could become the heroine of an overall festival? That we see, Ms. Han, only in Ireland, in which another poet was celebrated. But do we see the tradition of our culture that intellectuals, literacy, literature
Yes.
are very much appreciated? Is that still the case today?
Yes, of course, yes. And very nicely, I think David reads about his Li Sao, and we know that poet Qu Yuan actually created a new style of the Chinese poet in the literature, which is called Sao style, and in which he created not only the 4 Chinese characters verses, instead he created the variety of Chinese
That's right.
verses.
David, tell me, what is your sense? I mean, China developing so fast, as we all know. There seems to be also a disconnect between modern China, contemporary China, and the Asian civilization of China, even though there has been strong interest today that people have toward what we had, what we were before. But how much of that really is with us today?
Well, it's a good question. It is a long time ago. China has a very, very long history. I guess you could say even the language, Qu Yuan's poetry is very beautiful, but I think for most young people, the language of that poetry is far in the past.
That's
It's
true.
Wen Yan, or it's even further back. It's not easily readily accessible to most people. And some of the ideas that he was fighting for and was so sad and lamenting are long past. There are things that don't have relevance seemingly today. But I think the power actually is in the fact that those things have become abstractions. They now no longer represent the specific battles at that particular warring states period. It's now a larger sort of abstract notion of just simply a poet expressing love for his country and righteous sense of righteous justice at what was happening around him. And I think that's universal. That's not even Chinese. That could be anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
right?
we see this fad going on right now here in China, which is, for example, about reading the ancient poems, Tang poems and songs as well. But many wonder, are we getting the superficial meanings of these poems, and also where and when these poems were born? Or actually, we can have the empathy of our ancestors as they were writing these poems. David, once again, I want to go to you before I go to Ms. Han.
So I think it's true that people have a sort of superficial understanding. Li Sao, that poem itself, you may have noticed, is very long.
Yes.
It's probably one of the longest poems, or the first in a lineage of quite long poems. A lot of Tang poems are just 4 lines long. But again, I think that the importance of the poem is more in the, of course it's a very well crafted poem, but it's more in the power of the ideas.
Yeah.
It's in the power of the cultural ideas, and also the power of and he was a political thing. It was about politics, and that's something that never dies. It's still active in our lives today. Yeah.
Modern interpretation of ancient poems, some say, could be a beautiful thing. Others argue it is not necessarily going to be the case, because people are just going to take advantage of the ancient literature and make the points as they wish to, without necessarily loyal to the original meanings of the poems.
Yes.
What do you make of these kinds of debates going on here in China?
You mentioned a word, disconnect, which I agree with you that there might be some moments of disconnect in the Chinese history. The disconnect maybe during the Cultural Revolution, the disconnect at some certain points, but still the spirit keeps going on, and there might be some disconnect with this Li Sao style and the different explanations of the meaning of this Li Sao poem in particular, such as the English translation of Li Sao. We translate it as Li Sao just, from its pronunciation, and we translate into farewell to sorrow. But there is another translation of Li Sao as encountering sorrow. So this is totally different translation, and to interpret that meaning, the different mindsets of the translators, their own mindsets. So I think it's positively. I think it's the different understanding of Li Sao from different perspectives.
Yeah. It's not just about the translation. It's really about how much
tolerated.
It's not just about the translation. It's only a very minor part of it, but rather how much do we know about these poems? You see, David, recently in China there has been some TV programs going on, even competitions about reciting ancient poems and interpreting ancient poems. But some say it is only a cultural fad rather than a urgency of the current generation to go to our roots, to really know what is going on and what the civilization has been like. So what do you make of this pop culture picking up ancient poems? Is that a fad, or could it be a positive beginning of something much bigger?
Yeah, I don't know that I would call it a fad necessarily, because it does come back again and again. I think that particular case was a certain TV show where they were trying to actually revive a very cherished tradition, which was appreciation of these poems. And the thing is, when you do that, you actually do highlight for people the actual power and the long-lasting attraction and beauty of those poems. People actually, it may be a fad, but in the process of watching that, there will be a group of the audience that will actually become actively engaged and will become long-term readers and rediscover these poems. The analogy I might give to is in the West is Shakespeare. You know, most young people can't understand Shakespeare. It's old-fashioned language; they don't understand it. But I've seen many cases of a Shakespeare festival, or they take a group of kids to a Shakespeare festival in the park in New York City, And lo and behold, a certain number of those kids actually find that very compelling and beautiful, and they go back and learn to read Shakespeare, right?
Great.
So, I mean, it can be a fad, but as long as it has some effect on a small portion of the people, that's a great thing, you know?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
In other countries, we see in Ireland, as we mentioned earlier, so-called the Blossom Festival, in memory of the main heroes in the Ulysses. That's another festival. But I mean, Chinese civilization has been there for 5,000 years, as we have always been talking
Proud
about.
of, yeah.
And yet, how much of those has been with part of our lives? Ms. Han, I'm sure as a Chinese, you can better explain about that.
I think it's always a good way to understand and to memorize, and thinking about some new creative ways to memorize, just as David mentioned, the Shakespeare's activities. We could also think about some creative activities to memorize that, other than the Dragon Boat racing activities.
You know, one of the things you talk seems to be in a very abstract way. It certainly reminds me of the challenges that the Chinese have these days about our ancient civilization, which is how much do we know? Sometimes I will have to admit that many of us even have to rely on the English translation to understand at least some specific layers of the meaning. I'm sure you do the same. For example, when the ancient script is being presented to you, can you really understand the meaning of it 100% or only 20%, 30%? Of course, that has a lot to do with the evolution of language. But on the other hand, what about that, using others as tools, another language as tools, to understand better of your culture? How much will that kinds of reference help us understand about ourselves better? And how much will that help us to do cultural comparison better? I think that is also a very interesting question.
Are you asking to use another language to understand our Asian culture, like the modern language?
I guess that's what I meant.
That's a very interesting question, like understanding Li Sao. Li Sao is written in definitely an Asian Chinese language. But I think it's easier or maybe better to understand our Asian language by, by learning our Asian language rather than using English to understand that. Yeah.
Well, interesting said, but difficult to do, I guess.
I would just make the point that, and I won't use Li Sao because most people in the West have never heard of him. It's too difficult.
Yes.
But Li Bai
Yes.
is the most famous Chinese poem, 床上明月光，疑是地上霜. That poem has been translated in almost every language. And actually, my students can get a lot from the English translation because it's beautiful in the original, but it's really the images that are so striking that resonate with homesickness and it's a wonderful poem. And I think if a Chinese person can't understand the tongue, vernacular, you could give them an English translation, they could be moved by it. So the real power of the poetry is somewhat independent of the actual language.
Nationality and the language itself, and particularly when you have translation masters and legends that are having much deeper understanding of its own culture than most of the laymen on the street, and it could be a big help in the further understanding of our ancient culture. Another thing is about Mr. Qu Yuan himself, the fact that he, as an intellectual, has become such a legend in China because of his spirit.
Yes.
And he's very strong-spirited, very much against, at the time, the realities of the society. Very rebellious one, and even rebellious to the extent that he had to commit himself suicide in order to make a point in the society. That practice, of course, is not encouraged, but that, in a way, David, has been cherished by Chinese intellectuals throughout dynasties and histories as one who speaks his or her mind, and also one who sticks to his or her points and opinions. That is also an interesting part of the history and legends of the Qu Yuan, and of course of the Dragon Boat Festival.
That's right. Well, and the importance of Qu Yuan is that his suicide had a great reaction among the people In fact, the two customs we have of the boats actually going to look for the
Dragon Boat
body,
Festival.
Yes.
and then the symbolism of the zongzi, the sticky
the-
rice,
the
as being
dumpling.
throwing in to make the fish eat the
Right.
rice instead of the
And
body.
evil spirits. Yeah.
Right, and the evil spirit. So you see the people themselves had a great love and resonated with his action. I think that's kind of the moral of the story for me, is that he not only had principles, but the people saw that in it and admired him for it, and then they were behind him. You know, no matter what the complexities of the political situation was, they saw his moral clarity as being something that they should emulate.
Right.
And
Life and
May I
death in
add
legends
that-
are not alone here in China, but also
Right.
in many other
Yes.
stories as well,
Yeah.
all over the world. But what about that point that this is a very strong-spirited person?
Yes, of
And it
course.
seemed that specific aspect of his personality
Yes.
is so much appreciated
Yes.
by the Chinese throughout history.
David sees it not only from a foreigner's perspective, but more of a spectator's
What about your
and
perspective?
observer's perspective, which is really appreciated. And from Qu Yuan, his own perspective, or maybe from his, the people in his similar period's perspective, he is a minister, remember. He's a noble person, and he's from the royal family, but he remains as an independent intellectual back to his time. And he is a man, stick to his own principles. These factors combining together makes him a hero, a very dramatic person back to his time. His person stick to his principles, and he would sacrifice his body to his principles, and he put himself in the Milo River. So this makes him a very interesting figure.
After all, when we're celebrating this festival, what are we celebrating about? What exactly are the things that has to be with us?
I would say that thanks to Qu Yuan, we have 3 days holiday. This
Yes.
is a joke. Yeah. But thanks to Qu Yuan, I think I would bring my family together, and we read Qu Yuan's poem together, and we will see many poets are inspired by Qu Yuan from Tang Dynasty, from Han Dynasty, that we have a lot of traces from Qu Yuan's poems, and we read that, we enjoy that, we appreciate that.
Right. It is really the beginning of another journey every time when we reach this festival, of discovering our own culture,
Yes.
and also discovering the beautiful history of Chinese poetry and the beautiful spirits of Chinese intellectuals.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for being with us. Han Hua, David Moser, really appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
happy Dragon Boat
same
Festival.
to you. Same to
Same
you.
to
Thank you
you.
for being with
Thank you,
us.
Tian Wei.
You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, still to come on our program on CGTN. I speak with the Secretary General of China Development Research Foundation on how childhood education can alleviate poverty. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. China being the world's second biggest economy is still a developing country. This situation will last long and is reflected in many ways. Today we hear from Mr. Lu Mai. He connects China and the world through the China Development Forum, while at the same time linking the nation's mainstream groups with the least developed ones through poverty alleviation. Before we explore different aspects of China through his story, take a look at this.
The China Development Forum is held in Beijing each spring. Also known as China's Davos Forum, it is designed as a platform for business and academic leaders to interact with China's top decision makers and economic planners. The event was founded in 2000 by the Development Research Center of the State Council and takes place after the NPC and CPPCC's national sessions. When thinking of modern China, the hustle and bustle in metropolitan centers comes to mind. But China is also a developing country and still faces the reality of poverty. Providing the disadvantaged rural children with material help is this year's theme at the China Development Forum. To learn more, we visit the Secretary General of China Development Research Foundation, Mr. Lu Mai. He and his colleagues in CDRF have launched pilot programs to provide education and nutrition for disadvantaged rural children, which are proving effective in eliminating poverty and enhancing social development.
Chinese government used a term outsider could not easily to understand. What's the comprehensive? What's the full comprehensive 5 ideas, something like that? Even us don't understand thoroughly. So, but through this forum meeting and through the help made by scholar, my international organization, and foreign business community and other foreigner, try to understand and communicate. Communication is very important. China development is good, not only for China, but for the world, especially for those companies who engage in China. So I think they can understand.
During the conference, I noticed your working style. You talk to everyone. Everyone can find you. And you listen to all their concerns. Many would say, this is an exhausting job if someone do their job like this.
The problem, I think, for Chinese government still facing is communication. We need to learn how to communicate with outsiders to understand what their concern. It's so simple to say we are still a developing country, but you're number 2.
Economy
You're
in the world.
huge, with the 1.3 billion for people, and the people feel some kind of the threatening, especially in the neighbor. We can understand that, and also we can understand the environment in the world is not so friendly to China. China is different. We say we are different, but they see us also as different. But China Development Forum try to show people the face is same, is human. We are same. We share the same problems. We share the prosperity want to with the worldwide, and we are in the same boat.
How much of your early experience really taught you about the necessity of things that you are doing right now?
We are a generation to pass, to experience the many difficult times in China.
Your parents were returnees.
Yeah. Also, for my parents, during Cultural Revolution, they have to move to Jiangxi to work in the farm.
You were sent as a young man to northeastern part of China, Manchuria, the part of China that was still suffering from poverty, extreme poverty, and severe weather conditions. And you survived.
We witnessed to those hard times to those farmers. So, but it's very good lessons for us to try to understand their concern.
The real China.
Yeah,
You were a teacher.
I was a teacher. The one student is really, how do I say, very active in the class.
Naughty, maybe that's a better word.
And so his mother invited me to home and have a dinner with mushroom with the chicken. I still remember.
Because, at the time everybody was so poor.
Yeah.
A meat dish, probably it's only an annual delicacy. So they want to invite you to the family and share with them because they really want to express their appreciation.
Yeah.
Suffering and challenging life for you, but at the same time it seemed that you enjoyed yourself by helping others at the time, those students. But of course we should forward a little bit. You went to university in big cities in China. You even go abroad, study in Harvard and many other places. So how do you see the contrast the different sides of China?
Try to understand what happened in the society. Try to understand the different level of government and the difficulties to implement any policy, and do some adjustment with local initiative. Interaction between the central and the local government, between the central government with different ministries, but most important is the central government with the bottom, with the society. So that's the process of decision making. That's the unique character of China decision making.
For some time, Mr. Lu, there has been debates about how willing China is now anymore about opening up, and how much guts does China have in pushing forward still with its reform agenda?
China needs to change and then reform ourselves. Opening up is the one way to help our reform. And this is credibility, legitimacy, and the promise, the social contract, whatever the words you want to use. But if China wants to achieve the goal by 2050, that's 200 years after the war.
Right, the Opium War.
Opium War. So China still have that goal and still have a long way to go. If we think we can stop here, we can try to protect ourselves by closed door. I don't think anybody have that stupid mind.
Development in China is not just about reform and opening up. It is also very much about how China, the biggest developing country, deals with poverty, particularly in its rural inland areas. China's State Council issued a National Child Development Plan for poverty-stricken areas. This program emphasizes the importance of education from early childhood to teenage years. Lu Mai, together with his colleagues at China Development Research Foundation, have devoted enormous amount of energy to building projects for it, from village kindergartens to free lunch programs at primary schools to vocational training for teenagers. During our interview, he could not help but brief us on all these exciting developments. So these are where the schools are.
Yeah, very easy to identify. There are 40 provinces, 100 counties, 9,000 schools. We just put, for example, Guizhou. So how many schools in there?
It comes out.
Yeah, Guizhou.
2,516 schools in Guizhou that are benefiting from this project.
Yeah.
These are specific names of those little counties.
Yeah, Zhijin, and we can find a school.
Oh, wow, it's amazing.
If we look at any of those, yeah.
This is where the school is, in Bijie.
Chadian Township and the Haima School. How many students? They said 365. And this is the meal they have.
The kind of meal they have.
Yeah. Look at this is the backward, analyze the data, analyze the situation. Those are nutrition situation. So if we look at the energy, yeah.
How many calories they're taking for the lunch?
Yes. So from this room, we know the China, the world, especially in those mountain areas. It's difficult to monitoring, to get the first-hand information. But with this technology, we can do that.
You can do that.
We're monitoring 3 billion RMBs the government spent in those areas.
3 billion, that
3
is
billion.
the amount the government put into this free meal project now.
Only in this 100 county. If we expand it to total 680 counties, we can monitor all of those. But it costs some money.
Right.
We have no
Are you
money.
happy about this? I mean, to see your mini little project at the very beginning, now sprouting Around China.
The children are very happy. We will analyze their face, their smile, because we have so many pictures. So from those pictures, we can analyze.
You can
Are we
also
really happy or not? Yeah. Look at this side. Local school teacher sent to us. Look at the boat. It's so big,
The boat.
just like a face. Yeah, but they eat them up every day.
because they're very young, they need to grow, huh?
Yeah, I'm very happy to see this one. I cannot eat so much.
And look at that, because they don't have even a table, huh? It's a poor area.
Yeah.
So they just put the bowl on the floor.
We need to improve their life step by step. First, have a food. Second, have a quality, the food. And the third, maybe environment issues should be concerned. Yeah.
But Rome was not built in one day. Lu Mai understands that sustainability and results are the key for all projects.
Yeah, it's already 10 years. We see the progress, like a school meal. Now, our project started 2,000 students have a lunch. Now is 32 million for students.
It has become national policy.
Yeah. The village kindergarten, we built 1,100. Now, local government try to use this model to build another 10,000 in 3 provinces. So we made a progress, but still, those are far away. Those kids cannot speak by themselves. Those family has no influence on the media. We need to bring people to look at that.
You advocate about a combination, both education and nutrition. That has been a rare thought, shall I say, among many of the philanthropic works here in China. When you try to push forward this project, do people ask you questions?
Yeah, we try to convince all of them why the money should put in these 2 issues, education and the nutrition. This is based on the very solid the evidence. In 1990s, after that, the people figured out about the brain, how the children learn. And with those knowledge, we know the most important things is intervention of the nutrition, intervention for the parenting and the education. Think about that. Someone born in Beijing, for example, my granddaughter, she has everything, parents and also books and everything. But same time, some boys, some girls are born in the poverty area. At the beginning, they are same, till 18 months. After that, the difference show a big gap. The knowledge, the language, especially social skill. Why? This is unfair. The only reason is you're born in some different family. We need to help those bottom 20. Help those families, the children. Their grandpa take care of them, but do not know how to talk with the baby. Their parents work outside of the village. Who can do something to help them? I hope government can do something. Government has financial resources. It need a good organization and put all those resources together. So we try.
Mr. Lu, you just came back from one of those trips in which you try to investigate what are the latest situation. I just wondered how things have changed as you see it.
Oh, this change happened in the children. This time I went to Hubei Hunan Guzhang County, and there is a little girl. When she was 4 years old, she was left behind of children, and
her parents are all migrant workers.
Yeah, and her grandpa was very nice to her, but cannot teach her. So you can see that short video. And after this class, we didn't solve every problem, because the parents still outside of the village. But the children, that Peng Ya, learn from teacher and can talk with the stranger. When we visit there, we see the changes. Yeah. Earlier days is important to her. She learned some social skill. She know how to communicate with outside.
Did you try to talk to her?
Yeah, yeah.
What did you guys talk about?
Not too much about the school, about what she learning. And in Bijie, we see another family. And this family, Mr. Huang, graduated from primary school, but only 4 years he learned a few words. And his wife could not read. So the government helped him to build a new house. But his daughter, now in 4 years in the primary school, the grant is just 20 score in the 100.
Oh. So she has difficulties, certainly.
Yeah. And the two young kids, one is 2 years, one is 4 years, they're afraid of the people. They cannot face to me, face to outsider, afraid to
Lack
talk
of
to
social
people.
skills.
Yeah. They have no hope for this family. Yeah. Even you build a new house, you give them some tool, but without invest in the human capital, without invest in the early years, is no hope for the family.
Lu Mai helping us understand better about poverty alleviation all over China. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can try to find us, Worldly Insight CGTN, in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo as well. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on Worldly Insight with Tian Wei team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. And have a great Dragon Boat Festival.